So in order to have this debate that you will see is extremely timely, we were going to have on stage two professors, one professor from Seoul University, a lawyer and specialist leader of the Center of Bioethics. We're also going to have a natural philosopher from the Passman University. We're also going to have the chief of the Jewish Orthodox community here in Hungary. And last but not least, there is somebody we are not going to have anymore, Mr. Philip Nitschke. He's a firm partisan of euthanasia, and he's the designer of a capsule that basically, allows you to commit suicide. So it's like a big capsule, very modern, very futurist. You press a button and you die. The problem is that this capsule has been used for the first time in Europe, in Switzerland, 4 days ago. And the Swiss authorities are investigating this case. And now they open some criminal proceedings against Mr. Nitschke. So he was here this morning, but he left. So I think we owe you this explanation here in the room to the audience. He was here, but he left. We're going to leave his seat empty, but otherwise we are going to proceed. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome on stage Mrs. Sándor, Judit, Mr. Frivaldszky, János, and Mr. Köves, Slomó. Please give them a round of applause. Should euthanasia be legal? Please give us your concrete thoughts in 2-3 minutes, please.
My answer in short is no. And I think in order to summarize the basic parameters of my opinion, I would just like to present 3 basic ideals that are viewed upon totally differently if you're coming from a secular worldview or if you're coming from a Bible-based Jewish worldview. So first, what is the most important thing for the human condition? In a secular worldview, probably self-determination is one of the most important things. I should not be forced to do something against my will, and whenever I do something based upon my will, then it's acceptable as far as it doesn't hurt others. The Jewish Bible-based worldview is that the most important thing is life. And it's so important that it overrides not only in a case where I'm trying to hurt somebody's life against his will, but it overrides also if I'm trying to hurt him with his will. And even so, if I try to hurt myself. So in the Jewish worldview, suicide is homicide. Jewish worldview is very different. What is life? So in the secular worldview, life is finite, and therefore it can be measured. It can be measured based upon the quality of life, the intellectual, emotional quality of life, and based upon your contribution to the world. In the Jewish biblical worldview, life is infinite since it's based upon your soul, which you got from God, who is the totality of infinite. And based upon this, the whole idea of life being in the center is one of the most important ideas. And third and most short is the idea of consent. In the secular worldview, as far as you give your consent to something, then it's acceptable as far as it doesn't hurt others. In the Jewish biblical worldview, it's not only about your consent, since your own life and your own body doesn't belong to you. It belongs to you and to your Creator.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Rabbi. Professor Frivaldszky, what about you? Should euthanasia be legal?
Absolutely not. I think that it is, if it would be legalized, it would be contradict the natural law, stemming from the very nature of the human being. It means that it would invalid in itself. Maybe we can't see the wood for the trees we have because of these categories: active, passive, voluntary, non-voluntary, involuntary, rationalized, objectively rationalized, or natural, or artificial means. It is, I think that it is bird, everything. We have to consider what is we talking about. It is the life of the human person. And I think that there is proven actually that there is a spiritual dimension of the human person, and this spiritual dimension, it is the evolving the person's life until the natural end. And this is very interesting how this spiritual dimension comes out at the threshold when the life and the death at this border confines. And it is very important to know that when we kill someone, or by euthanasia, or by assisted suicide, we kill not just the body, but the spiritual soul before being flourished, accomplished. It is a huge crime, cruelty, inhuman cruelty.
Thank you very much. Professor Sándor. Yes, no?
Sorry that I, as a legal scholar, I would need a very precise definition to answer such a question. And also, I think the context also matters. So I'm in favor of respecting the end-of-life decision, because I think that what is very much belong to the humans is respect for human dignity. And human dignity is not diminished at the end of life. We should provide and protect human dignity even for the terminally ill person. I think there are a lot of conditions which is very important that we can actually speak about these issues. One is that the healthcare system, what are the alternatives? Whether we make sure that we give all possible treatment for the patient to relieve the pain, if there is a good level of palliative care, hospice. So we really try to make sure that the patient is not suffering, and we try to diminish the suffering of the patients, because I think that it belongs to human dignity. Moreover, if you read someone's life story, sometimes for famous people, you see that the way someone is dying is a part of a life history. Many times they say after long suffering, after patiently tolerating a lot of suffering. And I think, therefore, we have to think that it belongs to the human dignity and self-determination of a person. It's another condition which we have to mention, that in many law there is mentioned that a natural course of the disease. We can hardly speak about natural course of the disease in the 21st century. Many people who had a severe condition, they have been treated for years. They tried many things, and it's actually not a natural course of the disease, because there is also an intervention. So I think that another condition, it has been already mentioned, which is, I think, very important, the consent. That there is an information in a culture of taboo. When death is a taboo, people cannot speak about it. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, also several other scholars, told that one of the biggest problems was when the terminally ill people were treated, they were isolated. They couldn't tell, they couldn't speak about the most important things for them, that they are dying. So if there is a taboo, there is not even a discussion. We cannot even elaborate what is the wish of the person who is suffering of a terminal illness. So I think that what is important from human rights perspectives is to try to make sure that we respect the human dignity of people, even at this last phase of their life. And one element of the human dignity is to respect their wish, their self-determination. There are a lot of studies about it. For instance, what's the difference between when physicians are refusing medical treatment and when lay people refuse medical treatment? And it turned out that those who know more about it, what's happening in the intensive care units, or which is a kind of black box for lay people, then the doctors would more likely would refuse certain treatment which lay people are not aware. So it's a very complex thing, and end-of-life planning is important, that people can speak about it, what they wish. If it's a taboo, if they can't discuss with the doctor, if the doctor let them alone, not offering a treatment, not offering a relief of alternatives, we cannot even address this issue. So therefore, the context is also important where we intend to legalize or some forms of euthanasia, which is the healthcare system, what are the alternatives, palliative care, and whether there is an open discussion on the end-of-life decisions.
Thank you very much. So after this first round, you put already on the table two topics that I think we should further discuss. The first two speakers spoke about more like the spiritual dimension and the philosophical dimension. But my question will be, okay, but what about people who are heavily suffering? What do we do with them? Basically, are palliative care the only solution we have on the table? Is it satisfactory enough? And also, Professor Sándor, you put also on the table the concept of human dignity. And there, being a bit provocative, it's my role, sorry about that, but what does it mean to dignity? It means that, for example, somebody who is in a wheelchair doesn't have a dignity. Somebody who cannot have a shower on his own is not worth, of this dignity anymore. What does it mean? That we should always be young forever, eternally young, and the minute we stop being fit, we lose our dignity? What do we do for pain, and what about human dignity?
Three questions. Spiritual dimension, dignity, and palliative care. Yeah. Something is proven because if just consider the terminal lucidity, the patient in a dementia or Alzheimer's core disease or damaged because of cancer, maybe 4 years, with a completely damaged, ruined brain, woke up before the death and makes something very important, meaningful things, moral deeds. That is, give forgiveness, ask for forgiveness, say, I love you, connectedness, and say at the end, goodbye. It is absolutely a shock for the researcher because can be explained in any other way, that is, in the very extreme moments, that is, at the threshold of life and death, it is very clear that the spiritual soul, mind, if you will, detached from the brain. It means that in the very everyday life, there is a soul, even though we can't detect it. That is, there is a spiritual soul, and in this spiritual soul, there is a real autobiography of the personality. That is, if just we analyze the entire course of our human life, there are stages. And the more important stages going to occur in the end of our life. And the palliative care is important because we have to compassion, suffer with this patient in order to get help to them to go through these very important periods. Because the suffering, such as Viktor Frankl said, the founder of logotherapy, makes the people insightful. And his own reality transparent. That is, there is an intrinsic dignity and the attributed one from outside. It is the sociological question, that they are useless, burden for the others.
In one of the major documents which Europe has on this, the Unified Convention starts with the primacy of the human being. And it's very clear that even the sole interest of society and science cannot prevail over the individual's right and the dignity. So actually, that if someone else decides, I think that this life has a very low value or something of age. It's against the human dignity.
Yeah,
the human dignity but it's a problem when it's happening, and therefore I think that one of the baseline in which we can start the debate to respect equal dignity. We know many systems, and I don't want to refer to the most well-known examples of euthanasia, T4 programs during the Nazi Germany. There were even countries where above a certain age, people were not taken by the ambulance car. they thought that they can save some money from the healthcare system. This is not providing equal dignity of human beings. That's very important. And to respect, even if it's a kind of, I would say, the last gestures for the others, to respect what would be the wish of the person who is leaving, to respect. And many people think that it's a one-way direction to argue. It could be that someone would like to struggle. Someone would like to live until the grandchild will be born. So it's not given up, but it's respect the humans. Also the self-determination, also try to relieve the pain, not to instrumentalize the person, to recognize even in this condition of vulnerability as a human being who possesses these rights.
So your concept of dignity is also strongly linked to the, let's say, your own will, so to your own self-determination. Okay, thank you. Rabbi.
So first about pain, what should be done when there is pain? And I totally agree with Professor Sándor about the context, which is very important. And the Jewish religious law, the halacha, goes into great detail about this, also regarding this topic. But just to mention a few tastes of that. So number one, there is an interesting story in the Bible about King Saul, when he lost the war against the nation of Amalek, and he saw that they will take him and kill him. So before they had a chance to do that, he killed himself with his sword. So there are certain Jewish legal scholars that say that from this we can derive that in certain conditions, you can actually make a decision to end your life if there's a large chance for later suffering or other conditions. Most of the legal scholars don't accept this. But then the question is, how was King Saul allowed to do so? And the answer is he was not. He was not allowed to do so. The same way there's another example that anyone that has visited Israel might know this place. There's a famous fortress next to the Dead Sea called Masada, where there is a story mentioned by Josephus Flavius about Jewish rebels against the Romans that have, in their final course of the fight, have all killed themselves, all few hundred of them. And most legal scholars say they were not allowed to do so, and they still did so. What can you do if you have a lot of pain in the foreseen future? So there's an interesting discussion in Jewish law about this. And number one, a surprising, interesting note, you're allowed to pray for your own death in order not to suffer. But you're not allowed to actively kill yourself. Not only you're not allowed to actively kill someone who asks you to kill him, but even to yourself, you're not allowed to kill yourself in an active way. And here I would make a differentiation between active and passive, which in the Jewish law is not the same term as in the secular law. Active and passive in Jewish law means, for example, it is considered euthanasia and it's not allowed the same way that you should get a shot that would end your life, or to take you off from the respirator. They're both considered active, which is not allowed. But if you're getting a certain treatment that you're supposed to get every 2 weeks, let's say, and if you will stop getting that treatment, you will eventually enhance your death. You're allowed to stop getting that
Which, by
treatment.
the way, it's basically the state of the art in the majority of the countries of the European Union. Like, this is what we call this passive euthanasia. For example, to stop a treatment is allowed almost everywhere in the Western world.
Right. And I think the important issue here is we're coming back to the same topic of human dignity and self-determination, and what is human dignity derived from? I think this is the core issue, the core problem that we have to address. Because in a biblical thought, obviously, human dignity is derived from the Creator and being created in so-called the image of God. Since it's so, you fulfill the other person's right to human dignity as well as your own right to human dignity, as far as you use out even the last second of your life in order to fulfill your mission on this earth. If you believe that you were created by a conscious Creator that had a plan with your creation and has a plan with your life, actively ending of your life before the time has come, you're acting against your own human dignity given to you by God. And just one small example, I have met a relatively famous rabbi a few years ago, maybe 15 years ago, whose grandfather is from the famous town of Nagykálló, and now lives in the United States. And I just heard a few years ago that he got the sickness of ALS, the same sickness that Mr. Karsai has. And by now, he's only able to move his eyes. It's a terrible sickness with terrible pain. Basically, you're locked into your own body. And he's only able to use his eyes. But he still writes with his eyes every week a long article for his community. And he communicates with his community. And he's trying to act just by moving his own eyes the same way he did when he was physically active.
I see, but just to be extremely plain, to the risk of shocking a bit the audience, sorry in advance, but I think here the question is like, when a person does not even have the physical capacity to commit suicide itself, because suicide is as old as mankind. Why should we? I mean, what's the difference between somebody with two hands who wants to kill himself and with somebody who cannot use his two hands to kill himself? And so I think this is really like the entry point of euthanasia. I mean, if somebody wants to take this, macabre or whatever decision, but he cannot. Why is that? But the corollary of that as well is, why should the state as well help people to commit suicide? I mean, why is it the state's business to enter, into that decision, or even to help, when actually, yes, they are ways of committing suicide?
Yes.
Very shocking. Apologies, bocsánat, elnézést.
No, I think that it is always a bad thing to commit a suicide. It is a psychological problem. My wife is clinical psychologist. It is a bad thing. That first of all, I think that it is very important to know that the suffering is something psychological, or regarding the meaning of the life. Just to mention Viktor Frankl, and he survived 4 Nazi camps, concentration camps, that there is always the meaning. It is a problem. These persons are in need. The suffering and the pain aren't the same thing, and aren't collateral each other. There should be pain without suffering. There could be suffering which is very subjective. We just can't defer to the patient's own assessment of their suffering. Suffering is something psychological. And we have to acknowledge that actually the palliative care is so efficient that the physical pain, there is not such as physical pain. Analgesical, psychological aspect of that. Just to mention a Canadian psychiatrist, Chochinov, the therapy of dignity. It is a very simple interview, how to sum up your life, wrap up all the good things, what would be your message for the others, for the loved one. And this enhances their subjective, perceptive dignity 87%. Just a very simple interview with them. It means that this type of suffering, mainly psychological one.
I just wanted to say that there are many different situations at the end of life. So there are some cases when simply terminating life-saving treatment ends to death. But there are some cases when the patient is suffering such a condition that simply terminating life-saving, life-sustaining treatment would not solve his situation. Actually, he would even suffer more.
So palliative care is not always enough.
And Englaro case, Nancy Cruzan case, there are several other cases when even when they terminated the treatment, they said, what about feeding the patients and keeping the body still functional? And so then the same thing also that some people who are paralyzed are not capable of committing suicide. Then the issue comes that whether someone has a right to ask assistance. What is assistance? It is also interpreted in many different ways. So I think that we tend to believe that when someone is towards the end of life, then there are objective standards or there are similar situations. No, I think that, and the person himself or herself is capable of assessing his or her condition the best. So if externally we try to make a judgment of the life, that we are not respecting the human dignity of that person. He knows the best. There are, of course, some comparisons. Once we made the comparisons in US, they more likely use some medical standards. In Europe, many times there are subjective elements because indeed, it's very hard to estimate based on the condition whether a person suffers and what is the degree of suffering. This is not just physical suffering. Some people suffer because of being dependent on the others, not capable of doing the daily routine and dependent on several other people. It's also suffering. So it's not just physical pain, which we label as suffering. And then it comes to the situation, how can we distinguish between people? It's another legal term, discrimination. If for one person we can help, because simply terminating life-saving treatment would have the effect which he wanted, not to suffer any longer, but in several other cases, it's simply not the same situation because of nature of the disease. Also, ALS was mentioned here because of the Karsai case. It's also, it's not so much the case of a physical suffering because of pain, but it's much more the feeling of not capable of participating in life, being dependent, and to see the gradual deterioration of the conditions. It's very subjective. Some people can live with it, like we heard that even using the eye movement, but some people cannot. And that's I think we cherish the human dignity to understand these differences among us.
So again, you go back to your point that human dignity is a personal choice, mostly. Thank you.
We have a different view on the idea of committing suicide, since in Jewish thought, suicide is homicide. So you cannot commit suicide. But I want to mention something else. When you speak about how that decision should be made, and should doctors do it, and should the state be involved, I think we have to speak about also a side effect of all this, in my view, is the idea of corruption and compromising of the ethical state of doctors and the state itself. So there is a famous line in the Bible where it says, "He shall heal him." And the Talmudic sages say, here we see that Bible gives us the importance of a doctor healing a sick person. And actually, it's giving the permission for the doctor to heal the sick person, not to say, okay, this is something from God and let him die. But the doctor has only the obligation and only the permission to heal, but not to do the opposite of healing. And if you start using doctors for ending people's life, that ultimately would compromise, I think, in general. And just one more word also about the idea of aging. So if you start saying that if a certain person is at a certain age or a certain physical condition, he's worthless and therefore he should die, I'm putting it in simple words, that also means that basically you're questioning or you're turning around the idea, which I think is a very important idea, of the respect for the elderly. Which is basically, if you're old and you're useless and just either you die or you die quicker, but there's no other need for you.
Yeah, and also something that can be applied to disabled people, by the way.
Apply to?
To disabled people.
Right.
Professional integrity is a very important condition. So I think it's important to raise. So what is the role of a physician in that? And I agree that a physician should even suggest that he would like to save life, he would like to treat the patient. So that would be very strange if the doctor initiated a talk that, let's talk about euthanasia. That would be very strange position. So professional integrity is important. But I also think that if you see, and I know that it's always a frustration for a physician that you cannot help. You tried everything, but the patient is suffering. And then to let the patient alone, sometimes it's contributing to accelerate its suffering. So then I often say that medical assistance in dying person, for providing assistance for the dying persons is very important. And we know tragic cases. We all in Hungary, and we know the Binder case when a mother with a child who was very severely ill left alone. And then these are the most shocking cases when a relative tried to solve the issue with help. And of course, it was a homicide, and she was prosecuted because of what she did, and later on she got a kind of mercy. But I think that it's also the physician should not give up on a terminally ill patient, and of course freedom of consciousness is important. No doctor should be forced to participate in the procedure, but it's also a medical duty to relieve the pain and to respect the wish of the terminally ill patient.
But precisely, that takes me to the question of the slippery slope. And this slippery slope exists.
Yes.
I give you the case, for example, in Canada. A man called Alan Nichols was euthanasiated by the state. If you look at the records, the medical records, basically the only thing they put is that he couldn't hear well. So it was a mistake, probably, and his family complained and stuff, but it happened. I also give you the case of Mrs. Lermite in Belgium. This lady killed her 5 children, and 16 years ago, while she was in jail, she asked basically to die. Well, what was her illness?
Yes.
Mental illness?
Yes,
Maybe yes. And also, you have cases in the Netherlands and in Belgium, for example, when some doctors, some physicians are taking the decision instead of a patient with Alzheimer's, for example. What kind of consent can somebody give when they have Alzheimer's? And at the end of the day, the question is it going to be cheaper to get rid of old people in an aging society? You have a Japanese movie called Plan 75, who basically speaks about it. Japanese aging. As from 75, honestly, you did your life. You are not enjoying it so much anymore. Why don't you die? And then you make a favor, including to the state budget. And this is currently, you have a fierce debate about it in Canada, which is like the country where today 4% of deaths are involved in the one way of the others. So especially this is a question for you, I think, Mrs. Sándor. Those things exist. Aren't you afraid that if we allow one thing, we're going to allow all the possible abuses after that, as the experience shows?
That it's a wrong legislation. If something would allow all at once and even without any limitations of people with different psychiatric conditions to ask the terminator life support or something when we don't make sure that it was their own wish. I think the slippery slope is a known argument in ethical debates. I agree that, and therefore I wanted to have a precise definition of euthanasia, because some people may understand that even it's a matter of convenience. If I don't feel fine, I would like to end life. And if there are, this is allowed, that's simply of a kind of desperate, after a desperate day, of course, it would be of a terrible. I think that in countries when they had a debate, for instance, in Portugal, there were a lot of instances when they tried to make sure that all the guarantees are finely tuned and the nuances are in the law. And there were a debate, and I think no country could save in the world to debate on the issues of the end of life, because there is a context, a social context, a moral context, economic health conditions, and if it's interpreted without a precise definition, then exactly it might lead to such a kind of broad term, which would not be acceptable, and it actually doesn't provide any guarantee to the human rights if it's immediately, without such a definition, is extended for all kinds of psychiatric conditions, dementia, and in other cases.
If we consider why the people who attempted suicide, jumping off of the Golden Gate Bridge, all the survivors were regretting they did. Meanwhile, we are just euthanizing young people with lost vision by diabetes, bipolar personality disorder, borderline disorder even. It is very subjective. Mm-hmm. And it does not mean that SOS save your lives. It is the transhumanist ideology. There are unfit people. There are the fit one and the unfit people. All this, according to them, they are unfit, useless. Ageism and all these suffering people with several psychological disorder. Excuse me.
No. It's indeed, yes. Human dignity, is it a choice or just the fact that we are not young and beautiful enough? and fit enough. Any questions from the audience? Kérem szépen.
Also, I live with a Jewish family like a few months ago, and they said that in the Bible has a commitment that we have to love everybody in this earth, and also God loves us. And I don't understand that how you or the Bible can say that God loves me if He not respect my decision or my interest, because I'm not only just a plant whose only interest to my well-being or being alive. I also have some other goals that maybe have a good life or doing something else. And if He not respect this, then He doesn't love me.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so if I understood correctly, your question is that you heard from a Jewish person that it says in the Bible that God loves all people, and how can He love me if He doesn't respect my decisions?
Yeah.
So I would compare this to, I don't know, I think you probably don't have children yet, but when you will have children, or if you remember when you were a child, and your parents, I think, probably loved you, still, they forbid you from certain decisions that you wanted to make. And it's because they believe that your scope and your capability of decision-making is not totally not there, but it's limited. Certain things that you wanted to decide at the age of 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, till at the age of 18, for example, you're still limited, and they should be involved in your decision-making. Similarly, I would say, there are certain decisions where we have total free choice. That's the beauty of life, and that's part of the love that God relates us to. But on certain issues, we don't have the free choice. And we don't have the free choice because we don't have the full scope of what's going on.
Let's move maybe to the left-hand side of the room.
If some people want to end their life, why don't they do it? Why? Of course, there are some sicknesses and illnesses where it's not possible. You mentioned ALS. But why do they want to force this decision to doctors or the state or the society? Isn't it the situation that even if they have non-biblical view of these things, that they feel that it is a sin, and if it's legal, then and society says, okay, this is okay, then it's okay for them?
Thank you. For a quick answer, maybe Mrs. Sándor.
If I understood correctly, you wanted to say that if euthanasia, some forms of euthanasia is legalized, that is a strong message from the side of the society to what to do, and it's interpreted that that's the way you should do or something. And I think that it shouldn't be interpreted. There are many laws which had a moral component, and some people will use this law and some people will not use the law. And when we're speaking about terminally ill people, and I think I wanted to emphasize there are many different situations. There are people who are lying in a hospital, attached to different kind of machines. They are artificially supported, even their breathing. They couldn't set the rhythm of their beating, heart beating. And everything is artificially processed. That's the difference when someone is sitting at home, able to manage illness. I met Timothy Quill, who was involved in a US case of one of the assisted suicide case, and he mentioned that sometimes when he prescribed the medication for assisted suicide, the patient didn't actually consume the medication, but it was a kind of security in his pocket. So he knew that if he cannot any longer cope with the pain, there is a help. So it doesn't mean that people should use or they will use, but it's an opportunity in a case when they feel that they are vulnerable, they are unable to express their wish, they feel they're dependent and they have unbearable suffering. So that's the role of to find a good legislative scape. It's not easy, it's a whole art, it's a very complicated procedure, and it should not be interpreted, and that's also a matter of how the law is formulated. It should not send a message to people, that's the way you should do. That I think that would be a wrong interpretation. We cannot consider terminally ill people as a one category. There are many different situations. People have spent years in an intensive care unit unconsciously in a persistent vegetative state, and the people who are actively able to even perform their job, and they are suffering of a terminal illness. That's also of a very different category and different avenues of solving these issues, and the law should provide some assistance.
Thank you, Mrs. Sándor. We don't have time for the third question, but we're going to do it anyway. So please.
In Jewish worldview, is it considered acceptable for example, a conscious patient, terminally ill patient, to refuse long-term life support, for example, respiratory life support, or for the relatives to refuse this long-term life support for unconscious patients, terminally ill patients? Thank you.
If it's a life support treatment which is given which is given once every few periods of time, then you're allowed to make a decision you don't want to get that treatment anymore. If you are constantly on a respirator, for example, and if they take that off, you will die, you're not allowed to make this decision. To make the decision whether or not you should be able to give up certain treatment in the first case, as I mentioned, where it's from time to time, first of all, up to the person who's getting the treatment. If it's a minor, or if it's a person that is not conscious anymore, there are certain cases where it's allowed for the family to make the decision as well. And it is because ultimately there's, as I mentioned many times throughout this discussion, there's no difference between suicide and homicide. So if it's allowed for me to make the decision about myself, it has to be allowed also for somebody else to make that, and also the other way around.
And many thanks to the three speakers, Mrs. Sándor, Mr. Frivaldszky, Rabbi Köves, for this fascinating debate. Please give them a big thank you, a big round of applause. Thank you very much.
Thank you.